Hey there. Welcome back to the Equanimity Masterclass, where we're considering that little known word equanimity and why it needs to make a comeback in the world right now. And so today we're going to expand the theme of acting and allowing and consider the question of having those big, hairy, audacious lifetime goals and having equanimity at the same time. I mean, is that even possible? That's naturally a question that comes up for many people when we discuss the theme of equanimity. So the short answer to that question is yes, and for the long answer, well, let's go back to that both and thinking that we had a look at that enabled us to see how we can act and allow at the same time. And then we apply that into this context, which is to see that you can have a goal, you can be 100% determined and committed to that goal and taking action, and at the same time allowing whatever happens along the path to that goal. So perhaps it's the form of the goal that isn't working out. It looks different from how you imagined it to be. Or perhaps the scale of it, it's not as big as you imagined or hoped it would be. Or it's taking too long, or there are too many obstacles along the way. And so applying equanimity to whatever of those variables might arise. Let's take a look at some examples of how that might look in reality. So the first one we mentioned was the form. So sometimes you set a goal and it doesn't work out exactly as you had hoped. It looks slightly different. A good example for this one is the singer Adam Lambert from the American Idols series. So he was a phenomenal performer with an incredible voice and everybody expected him to win. And guess what? He didn't win. He came second. And what came out of that was that he was identified by the band Queen as being the person who could most effectively replace one of the greatest singers of all time, Freddie Mercury, and have the opportunity to tour the world with the band Queen. And so there's a great example where the form doesn't take the shape exactly that you would want it to. And yet it is ultimately a very satisfying, rewarding, and meaningful goal. Some of us in that situation may resist that a little bit. Another way in which the goal might not be achieved and therefore equanimity is required is in the scale of the goal. So in one of the earlier lessons, I used the example of Warren Whiteley, who was the Lions rugby captain, appointed as the Springbok captain, and then never got to run on the field as captain. And Sia Kolisi was eventually appointed in his place. And so he had great success as a professional franchise captain, a provincial captain, you could say. However, didn't manage to have the same level of success at a national level. Equanimity would be required to manage that and to be able to accept that level of achievement. And the third area where equanimity might be required is how long it takes to achieve the goal. And so for some people, they have early success, become a rock star or a writer or whatever it is professionally, and it happens for them very early. Others, it takes many, many years to get there. So we think of Mandela, who spent 27 years in jail on his path to the goal. We think of some of those other Britain's Got Talent. I think it was that competition where there was the singer Susan Boyle and the tenor Paul Potts, both of whom achieved their goal much later in life than many people would have wished or hoped if it was them. And so many of us might give up before then and think this is taking too long or take it as a sign. And equanimity would be required to understand and tolerate that and keep going no matter how long it takes to get to the goal. And then the other category we mentioned was obstacles. So once again, we might think of Mandela, who once again had 27 years in jail and many other obstacles to overcome in order to achieve his objective of liberating South Africa. And another one, again, if we look at the story of Paul Potts, if you ever saw the movie of his life, he had many obstacles along the way as well, where he was invited to sing for Pavarotti and he just got so nervous that he messed it up. Then he had a bicycle accident, got knocked over by a car, and then got sick and had many obstacles on his path to the goal. And how many of us in that instance would take that as a sign and say, well, maybe I'm not meant to have it, and give up, as against having equanimity, which enables us to accept what's happening and still remain determined and committed and taking action at the same time. So we can see that for some people, their vision comes strong and clear, and their path to the goal is a strong, clear run directly to the goal. One example that comes to mind is the violinist Yehudi Menuhin. When he was 4 years old, he wanted a violin. His parents gave him a toy violin, and he apparently threw it to the ground in rage because he wanted a real violin, because he knew what he was going to become. His acorn was clear to him. So there are those people from a very young age who have a very clear vision and their path to the goal is very clear. For many of us, most of us, I would say, the path is not always that clear. We debate which subjects we're going to study at university and what career we're going to. We get into that career, we sometimes feel not comfortable and when we have to explore alternatives. And only in midlife do we get to a point where we choose a career that is really meaningful. And then it's about perhaps setting up a business and a goal to having a successful business. And so the path to finding the goal is a struggle and the path to achieving the goal is a struggle. And we might think that those with a clear run to the goal are lucky, and yes, in some ways they are. They have less struggle, and yet those who struggle to achieve the goal may have other things that come out of it. Humility, appreciation, might be better teachers, might be a greater inspiration to others who have to overcome similar goals. And there's that, it reminds me of that saying that the best wine comes from the vines that struggle the most. And so equanimity enables you to remain present and peaceful and therefore powerful on the path to the goal, no matter what happens, while remaining 100% determined, committed, and in action in service of that goal. In the beginning of this program, I talked about having equanimity, accepting what happens while still participating fully in life. And that's what I meant, that you're still 100% active towards your goal and you're allowing things to happen at the same time. You have a more peaceful approach to the obstacles that appear to stand in your way. And a good question is, what stands in our way from having this equanimity? And consider this possibility. What if not having equanimity is because you or me or a person is saying that we know better than life itself, or the wisdom behind life that takes care of everything, that causes things to happen by themselves and take care of themselves? We may call that life, we may call it God, the universe. We each have our own name for it. That's personal. The point is, when we are not having equanimity, it's because we're saying our answer is right. Things should be the way we say they should and not the way that they are emerging in life. And so we're saying we're the smarter one here, not life, not God, not the universe. It should be my way. And when we recognize that fact, then a little bit of humility drops in and equanimity opens up spontaneously, the same as when we looked at those facts in earlier lessons. Equanimity opens up spontaneously by itself when you recognize that maybe you're not the smartest person in the room when it comes to how life needs to play out. And so we can say you become a student of life, or that reminds me of the Zen Buddhist saying that says only the empty hand can receive. The hand being the representation of the mind, which holds knowledge. So when I think I know everything, well, no more information can come in because I have all the answers. And so anything that life or any person tries to tell me gets rejected because there's no room for it. Whereas when I surrender knowing everything, I give up thinking that I know everything, I can then take the lesson. And there's that saying that when you take the lesson, the pain disappears. So in other words, when you take the lesson that life is trying to hand you by not giving you the goal immediately, then maybe the goal comes more easily. Maybe then you're ready to receive the goal. In other words, when you're not getting what you want, perhaps you're getting what you need. Maybe what you need is to learn what you need to do in order to be able to hold on to that goal. We think there of, say, people who win the lottery and within a very short time they've lost the money. Well, why didn't they have the money in the first place? Because they didn't know how to hold on to money. And now when they got money, they couldn't hold on to it. So if it takes you a long time to get to that financial goal, perhaps along the way you learned a lot about money so that when you got it, you could hold on to it. Or it took a long time to achieve the fame or the power or the success. Why? Because if you got it when you were young and arrogant, you may have taken advantage of it, exploited it, or thrown it away. And so by getting it after a long, slow, difficult journey of learning, you're able to hold on to it and use it for the greater good. And in all of these things, it reminds me of the symbol of the tree. So in Jungian psychology, Jung said that the tree is the symbol of the self, or the self is represented in dreams, for example, by a tree. So when you dream of a tree, it's representing the individual self, the growth of that self into a more mature, individuated being. And why the tree? Because he said every tree grows uniquely towards the light according to its environment and around the obstacles that it finds. So if it's in rocky soil, the roots will grow over those rocks. And if the light is only available in a certain direction, it will grow towards that direction. I remember living in Cape Town and the wind used to come over the back of the mountain, tremendous winds, and some of the trees grew, massive trees grew at an extreme angle like that. And yet they were tremendously strong. And that's just how they grew, because of the wind. And so if I take these principles and sum it up, I would say that the more you allow things to be the way they are and to emerge the way they are, while still pursuing a goal with full action and determination, the more likely you are to achieve that goal, even if it is in a slightly different form, different scale, different timing, or at the other side of many obstacles. The difference is you're allowing yourself to be molded by life and your goal to be molded by life, instead of being rigid and inflexible and stubborn and fixated about how it should be, or when it should be, or where it should be. And sure, there's a time to be very determined about certain things, and there's also a time to stop flogging a dead horse. So discernment is required. Is this a point for equanimity, or is this a point to remain determined? Is this a point to remain determined, or is this a point to say, I'm flogging a dead horse? There's no silver bullet, no absolute answer, no single rule. These are the guidelines, these are the principles, and every situation is unique, and that's where an element of free will, judgment, discernment comes in, and you have to decide which one to apply. The one thing I do encourage people is to not read everything as a sign. So just because something came in doesn't mean it's a sign, and just because something didn't work out doesn't mean it's a sign. Try to listen for that deeper voice, that sense of what's true, and stay with that, and listen to the guiding wisdom of life, the big picture, and allow things to emerge. And sure, occasionally there will be a sign. It'll be a very clear, like, aha, this is a synchronistic message. This is something. That should happen less often than every day. If it's happening to you every day and everything is a sign, or every second thing that happens is a sign, I think then you may be moving into a little superstition or a little too much reliance on that. Then listen to that deep inner voice and decide what's really true for you, and stay fixed on the goal, and just recognize that a lot of stuff just happens. Not everything is a sign. So in all of these things, you can see discernment is needed. So that's equanimity in a nutshell. It's a big topic, and if you'd like to know more, there's an article on my blog called Equanimity, a Word for Our Time. The link is in the credits to this video. And then if you'd like to take that further and perhaps develop equanimity as a competence, as a stable personality trait even, then I'd invite you to take part in the masterclass, which is also available via the shop page of my website, link below as well. I'm sure you'll find great benefits in that. So thank you. I'm Neilbierbaum, signing off. Don't forget to subscribe, and go forth and be equanimous.